Hey, Pastor Andrew here. Thank you so much for continuing to join us on this Gospel of Mark devotional series where we're focusing on Jesus the King. Well, we're still in Mark chapter 9. We're ending chapter 9 today. In this devotional series, we're going from verse 33 to about 37 of Mark chapter 9. So they've had an eventful series of events in chapter 9, which we've talked about, the transfiguration on the mount, and then the disciples being unable to cast a demon out of a child, and this whole situation takes place. And then it says that they come to Capernaum in verse 33. So they're heading back home. And along the way, we've learned from this section of scripture, these few verses, we've learned that on the way home, the disciples were kind of arguing and talking among themselves who would be the greatest. And I assume from this text, and along with others, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so Jesus says, Jesus was inside the house. I'm in verse 33. And he says, what were you discussing on the way? And then verse 34, but they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another of who is the greatest. And after he sat down, he called them, and he begins to teach them that in order to be the greatest, you have to be the servant of all. Great lesson. But it's kind of a funny thing when you think about this, that they're finally back home. Maybe they're kind of regrouping a little bit. And Jesus is like, hey, what were you guys talking about on the way? And then they're sort of exposed. All of a sudden, they realize the foolishness of their whole conversation. I have kids, and so I know how this goes. Their response was nothing, because they felt embarrassed to say, well, actually, Jesus, we were sort of comparing who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. And I wonder, hopefully not, but probably Peter, James, and John, who had experienced Jesus at the Transfiguration, should hopefully have a different outlook. I don't know whether they were involved in that conversation or not, but it's a funny thought. I have kids, and if you have kids, I'm sure you've done the same thing where they're talking and you overhear a little bit and you know that either a conversation is inappropriate, or maybe they're being mean to each other, or something kind of innocent or silly, or it could be something serious, and you come in saying, what were you talking about? And you get the look and the quiet and the nothing. We're talking about anything. Really, I could imagine Jesus saying, really, you didn't talk about anything the whole trip back to Capernaum. Nothing at all. So I think it's kind of funny. We just kind of see the interaction and the interchange that the disciples had with Jesus. And of course, either they spilled the beans and they came clean with Jesus, or he just knew exactly what they were doing. Both are acceptable answers probably in context. And Jesus says, listen, I'm going to teach you a lesson. It's so easy for us to be selfish. It's so easy for us to be all about us, hoping for the very best for us, wanting the best opportunities and the best position and power for us. But Jesus is saying, man, it's really about servanthood. It's really about servanthood. And so we have to humble ourselves, lay our own desires and our own will down and serve others. And that's a big order, isn't it? I mean, if we're honest, as Christ followers, that's a big order to be humble and to be a servant. But that's what we're called to. And so I'm sure if we could have conversations with Jesus, this is something for us to chew on in this devotional. If there's times when we've been chewing on some things in our mind about what we want for ourselves, or a career goal, or hope for the future, is this something where Jesus says, hey, what have you been thinking about? Are we going to be like, oh, nothing, I haven't been thinking about anything? Because we know we're going to say, Lord, I've been selfish, and it's hard for me to serve people. It's hard for me to humble myself. I really do just want the best for myself. Jesus' words here in verses 34, 5, 6, and 7 really help us a lot. That really, if we want to be great, we really have to be a servant. We have to really understand that loving our neighbor as ourselves and serving others is the most important thing. Something to chew on. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.